Thank you, Stephen, for that. Something you may not know about me yet, even though I've been here 2 years, is that I'm actually a country boy. I was raised in the country, raised around the farm. My stepfather used to say about me, you can take the boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the boy. So you say to yourself, what in the world are you doing in Columbia, Maryland? And I'm all God's fault, is all I can say. Now, on the other hand, my wife was raised in the city. She basically lived in apartments all of her life in Akron, Ohio area. And her setting was a very, very different setting. And so one of the first things we did when we started dating, we went to like a country festival, and they were making custom T-shirts. And so we bought T-shirts and had mine put across the front, country boy, and hers, city girl. And so we thought it was fun to wear those. At least we thought it was. Now, she liked a country setting. She just had never had the chance to live in a country setting. She was uninformed about the country setting. And so, of course, I was able to share my vast revenue of knowledge with her about living in the country. She learned a lot from me. She learned that John Deere tractors are what color? Green. Hey, someone knows. Thank you. She learned that John Deere tractors are green, and the engines, at least back in the 70s and 80s, the engines make a very distinctive popping sound when they're running. And so the nickname of a John Deere tractor is a Poppin' Johnny. And we were sitting in a restaurant outside up in Lancaster County, and they were working in the field across from us. And she stopped and she listened. She said, "That sounds like a Poppin' Johnny." She wouldn't know that if I didn't teach her. I taught her how to tell the difference between a 2-bottom and an 8-bottom plow. I taught her what the disc was all about. I taught her how to look at fields as you're driving 70 miles an hour down the highway and look at fields and tell whether they're growing beans or corn. I taught her that when it comes to sweet corn, there's an old saying that says it has to be knee-high by the 4th of July. Some of you know about country living. Knee-high by the 4th of July. I taught her how to can and freeze food, green beans, applesauce, peaches, tomatoes. I taught her how to plant and care for the garden. I taught her how to weed. I also, though, I have to admit this, I took advantage of her just a little bit. Took advantage of her city girl status by telling her things that weren't quite true. It wasn't really lying, but just a little off. Just a little off. Just pulling her leg a little bit. So, unfortunately, she grew to distrust some of my bounty of information about farming. Imagine that. When we were planning our wedding, since we were poor, we planned our own rehearsal dinner and provided the food for that. And we decided in September that we would have a big fruit salad. And as we planned it, I told her I would bring the watermelon because my sister has all kinds of watermelon growing at that point in the time of year in late August. So I would bring the watermelon, and it'll be really pretty. We can cut it in half and use the watermelon as a bowl, and I'll get some red watermelon and some yellow watermelon, and it'll be pretty together. To which she looked at me and she said, "Now I know you think I don't know much." And I know you think I'm just a city girl, but there's no such thing as a yellow watermelon. I said, no, really, there is yellow watermelon. You can't trick me on this one. No, really, my sister grows them. She says, are you talking about cantaloupe? I said, no, I'm talking about yellow watermelon, and maybe she might even have an orange watermelon. Well, I had to actually bring the watermelon and cut it in front of her to prove to her that there are yellow watermelons. Now, this is a principle that I know already, but you know it. But here's a principle in action that we find in Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. It says, do not be deceived, God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. I had been sowing misinformation. And so it's not that dissimilar to the story of the boy that cried wolf. I had been sowing disinformation, and I reaped distrust. What you sow, you will also reap. And it's true in so many ways, and it's true also in the spiritual life. So today I want to look at some lessons as we're getting ready for the evangelistic series. Some lessons about sowing and reaping. Jesus used continually lessons and parables about agriculture, about the agricultural setting, because that's what the people knew. I'm convinced that sometimes when Jesus is telling these parables, he's telling them and the people can see the parables being acted out right in front of them, over on the side, behind Jesus. He's telling stories from real life, and the people understood it. Now, many times we don't quite understand the agricultural stories today because we're not raised that way. But I want to tell you some principles. I want to share with you some principles about sowing and reaping. I've got good news and bad news for you. Which do you want first? Bad news. Everybody wants the bad news first. Okay? The bad news is you sow what you sow, you will also reap. What's the good news? What you sow, you will also reap. What makes it good news or bad news? What you sow. Exactly. That's the difference. What difference is there? Because what you sow ultimately will have to be reaped, and it can be good or it can be bad. So, the number one point I want you to see from sowing and reaping today is sowing is essential. Sowing is essential. In order for you to reap, you must first sow. Now, it almost sounds stupid. It almost sounds stupid to say this. You would think about a farmer. You go to visit a farmer, and you're standing out on the front porch, and you're looking across his fields. My brother-in-law is a farmer in southern Indiana. He farms about 800 acres of fields, and one of the fields is directly outside his house. You can stand on his front porch and look at it. And imagine standing in a setting like that, and the farmer saying, well, looks like it'll be a great harvest. And it's in the spring, and you're looking across the field, and you can't see anything growing yet. It's just barren ground. It's been plowed, but you see just dirt. And so you say, well, what did you plant? Because you can't see it growing yet. What did you plant? And he says, oh, I didn't plant any seeds. You would either think he is crazy or lazy. I don't know what. Whatever it is, you would not want to be a sharecropper with this guy. You cannot reap. There cannot be a harvest unless there is seed that is sowed. And the same is true in the spiritual realm and in the evangelistic realm. As we're getting ready for this series of evangelistic meetings, we've been trying to reap. We've been trying to sow so we can reap. Turn with me to Matthew chapter 13. Matthew 13. It's a familiar, very familiar passage, a parable. I call this one of Jesus' master parables. Jesus tells lots of parables, and some are master parables and some are secondary parables. This is a master parable. It describes something that is essential. The next one in this chapter about the wheat and the tares, that's also a master parable because they're so important. So here we have this master parable. Some people call it the parable of the sower. Matthew chapter 13, verse 3. It begins like this. He says, a sower went out to sow. Some people call this the parable of the sower. I like to call this the parable of the soils because that's really what it's all about. And so this sower goes out to sow. This is a vivid picture to me because when I was a little boy, when my daddy was still at home, we built a pond in the back part of our property. We had 20 acres, and we farmed about 15 of it, and then my dad wanted this pond. And so we had the bulldozers come in and build this pond, and the dirt, of course, on the banks of the pond and on the dam of the pond was just bare dirt. And so I remember my dad bought this contraption. It was made out of canvas, and it had a big canvas bag on the bottom. It had a distributor, a little wheel that would distribute the grass grain. And I remember seeing him walking back and forth and seeing the grass swirling out from him as he twisted this wheel. It's a very vivid, when I think about the parable of the sower, it's very vivid in my mind. I don't have many memories from when my father was home. Not a lot, but this one is very, very cemented in my brain. The sowing of the seed was essential. Why else? Why in the world would a man take seed that he could feed his family with and bury it? Because of the hope of the harvest. And so the sower went out to sow. And I can't tell you the whole parable today because I don't have time, but remember, the seed fell into 4 different kinds of soil. One was the path where the birds came and devoured it because it was too hard. One was the rocky soil. It had no depth. The roots could not dig deeply into the ground because it was rocky, and so they sprang up quickly. But when the sun came out, because there was no depth of the roots, it withered and died. The third kind of soil was the thorny soil, which started to grow quickly, but so did the thorn plants. And so as the seed, and we're talking about wheat, as the wheat seed began to germinate, so did the thorns, until finally the thorns overwhelmed the wheat seeds and choked them out. And then, of course, the fourth soil was the good soil, which produced grain, which produced a harvest, some 30-fold, some 60-fold, and some 100-fold. Now, you know, Jesus is not telling this story as an agricultural lesson because the soils are people. He's talking about how different people receive the word of the gospel. And the seed is the gospel being sown. And the soil is the hearts of the people that are receiving it. So, you know this parable, but ask yourself this question. Who do you want to be in the parable? Who do you want to be represented by in the parable? If I asked you to all raise your hands and I went through all 4 of them, I'm positive that most of you would say you want to be good soil, right? You want to be good soil? I don't. I want to be the sower. I want to be the sower. Now, I know somebody's going to say Jesus is the sower. You're right, he is, but he can't do all the work. The sower needs an assistant. And I want to be a sower. And you know what? We can all be sowers. It's all about people around us, that we can sow the seed of the gospel. We can share with them interesting things. We don't have to pull our Bible out and give them a Bible study, but do you know that by our actions, by our kindness, by sharing a testimony that wouldn't be overwhelming, we can sow the seed. You know, you can sow the seed by doing something as simple as bowing your head at the table in a restaurant and having a blessing. I can't tell you how many times when we do that, how many times people have acknowledged it or commented on it. Anything we do to try to make Jesus look good is sowing the seed. Pastor Paula was telling us about the meetings and about, we didn't know we were going to do this together today, but it's a God thing. What you said was perfect. This afternoon we have the opportunity to go out and give these flyers out. But you don't only have to do it this afternoon. We have enough for you to take some home. If you don't want to come back at 3 o'clock, we have enough that you could take some home, take 20 home and give them to every house in your neighborhood. You don't have to come back. You can still be sowing seed. Now, there are various ways to pass flyers out like this. One is what I call the sneaky way. You go to your neighborhood and put them in people's boxes. Or if you're at work, you wait till your coworker is gone from his or her desk. And you leave it on their desk and hope they see it. I hope no one else saw you. There's another better way. Julia, could you come up a moment? If you have a friend at work, you can say, hey, my church is doing something you might be interested in. You know, it's an interesting thing. Sorry. It's an interesting thing. When you hand something to somebody, most often they'll take it. Unless I'm at the airport and somebody's trying to put something in my hand, I don't take it. But if you're a friend or your coworker, they'll almost always take it, right? Right. And okay. So, but here's the best way to do it. Hey, my church is having this special program. I'm going to be there. Would you like to go with me? You see how good that is? See how good that is? Or can I meet you there? Or something like that. See, that's a personal touch. Now, thank you. You don't have to. Now, I've been thinking about how to do this in a physically distanced world. I don't know if this will work. Let's see. So, I guarantee you they'll look at it, they'll follow it some way. You know, the personal touch is best. Now, I know that's harder right now with COVID-19. Some of people aren't comfortable in coming out, but this will be an online and an in-person event. And I was just thinking about this. I was thinking about how to do this. I have this crazy idea that you could attend this event with a friend on Zoom. If you have a friend, so instead of saying, would you like to come with me, You can say, hey, I'm going to be watching it. I could give you a Zoom link and we could watch it together so we could talk about it. This is a new idea for me. So if you have Zoom, you could set up a Zoom link with a friend or a family or someone. You could set up your own personal Zoom link with them. And then once the two of you are on together and the meeting starts, you can share screen and you can watch the meeting together in your home, there in their home. You see the picture? I have no idea if this will work. I've never heard anyone say this. I'm sure someone has tried it because I'm not that smart. But anyway, this is another idea. So the idea we want to do is to get people involved and help them know about the meetings. There's another way that every single one of you who has Facebook could help expand and it could help advertise the meetings. We've got a picture. We don't have it. Okay, we have a picture of our church website. So if you go to our church website and go to, not the home page, but go to posts, our flyer is posted on our home page. Our flyer is posted on our post page on our Atholton Facebook page. If you would find the flyer, and you see it right there, you get to the post, and if you share the flyer, it'll go to your home page. Now, how many of your friends do you think are going to end up, I can get rid of this, how many of your friends do you think are going to end up on our church homepage? Have I got a problem? Homepage, almost none. But how many of your friends might see this flyer advertised on your personal homepage? A lot. That's why it's so important for you to like or to share this to your homepage. You know, if we did that, then all of your friends would hear about this. So I encourage you to do that. Go to your home, go to the church homepage and share it on your page. And many, many more people will see it. Sometimes churches, I'm convinced, churches don't grow because they don't sow. How can a church expect to have reaping in their church, souls being baptized, if they haven't done any sowing? It's impossible. On any given year, 50% of the churches in any given conference has 0 baptisms for the year. Can you believe it? Any given year, in some church, some years I've seen it higher. 0 baptisms for the year. Of course, last year wasn't the banner year for Atholton because of COVID. But sometimes we look at churches and we say, why aren't they reaping? That's the wrong question. The right question is, what are they sowing? Because they cannot expect to sow or to reap if they have not sowed. Here's this principle, 2 Corinthians 9:6. 2 Corinthians 9:6. You know this? It says, the point is this. Paul says, the point is this. Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. And whoever sows bountifully will reap bountifully. The principle, the importance of sowing. Now, this is the intermediate step that we don't often talk about. The second principle I want to teach you here is that the cultivation of a seed is also necessary. The growth of the seed is also necessary. Mark 7:27. It's another parable about agriculture. Mark 7:27. That's not Mark 7:27. I have the wrong text written down in my notes. It's a story about a man who plants a seed and he goes to sleep, and it says, while he's sleeping, the plant grows and he knows not how. Am I doing something bad here? Hold on, folks, I'm sorry. Okay, well, I'm just keeping going. We don't know how seeds grow. It's a miracle. We become so accustomed to it, we don't even realize it's a miracle. But it's a miracle. The miracle of growth happens around us all the time, and we're accustomed to it, and we don't even see it. Every seed that grows, every flower that blooms, speaks of the power of God. It is not Mother Nature. It speaks the power of God. It happens because He is the creator and the sustainer of life. And so it is true in the spiritual realm. Every seed of the gospel that starts to grow in someone's heart is a miracle of grace. Every single person who gives their heart to Jesus, it's a testament to the power of God. And so this intermediate step of growth is essential. 1 Corinthians 3:6, Paul says this, I planted, Apollos watered, and God gave the increase. Paul's telling us that the cultivation and the watering of the plant is essential. And we can also come in on that in the spiritual realm. Caring for the plant, sharing the gospel with someone, but as they start becoming interested, we can continue to befriend them, to treat them kindly, to do things that would continue to help them to grow in Jesus, like inviting them to the evangelistic meetings. Back to the parable in Matthew 13. Do I need to go to this microphone? Yeah, I'm just going to go to this microphone and just quit that. In the parable of Matthew 13, remember there are 4 types of soil. We talked about that. There are 4 types of soil. Which one will grow something? The good soil. But there's nothing that says in the parable that the other soils have to remain like they are. There's thorny soil. There's stony soil. There's the hard soil by the path. Every single one of them with effort and with hard work can be made to be good soil. Just because we look at someone and don't see a candidate for the kingdom of God doesn't mean they're not. We need to see people like Jesus sees them. So we might think, well, there would be no reason for me to invite this person. They're so arrogant, or they're so sinful, or they're addicted. There's no reason for me to invite this person. Well, guess what? They can change. The power of God can help them change. I remember at my old house back in Ohio that some of the flower beds were some of the worst in the world. When they had built the house, there's lots and lots of clay soil in Ohio. When they built the house, they had just pushed in the clay soil to fill in for the basement, and they hadn't put any topsoil over the top. And so it was just horrible, horrible flower beds. And so what did we do? We went out. I bought brick after brick. You know what I mean? These big bricks of peat moss. Went out and bought this peat moss. I dug the old soil out. We got some topsoil. We mixed the topsoil with the peat moss. Took the old clay soil out, and they became great flower beds. Just because they're stony soil today doesn't mean they'll always remain that way. And that's where we can come in to help cultivate the soil. Never give up. Never look at someone as being so unpromising that we write them off. Continue sowing seed. Who knows? The third point is reaping. All of it This is the essential part. Of course, all three have been essential. But without the reaping, what's the point? Would you leave the harvest in the field after all that work, after all that expense? I don't think so. This is where the verse we saw a couple weeks ago, Matthew chapter 9:37. We come back to where we started 3 weeks ago, talking about evangelism and talking about the mission of the church. Matthew chapter 9:37. Remember, Jesus says this. 9:37. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to the disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send laborers into his harvest. You remember a few weeks ago I said, surprise, that may mean you. You. You can be involved in the sowing. You can be involved in the cultivation. You can be involved in the reaping. You are all essential. Yeah, I know you're busy people, so am I. I know you're busy. It's hard for you to make time. But listen, this is the time. Have the meeting starting in a week. This is the time. When I was on the farm, I was about 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. I put up a lot of hay. A lot of hay. And there's an old farm saying, you've heard it, I'll bet. You haven't experienced it like I have. But there's an old farm saying that says you got to make hay while the sun shines. See, farmers don't just go out and cut hay on a whim. Farmers cut hay by looking at the weather. Because they have to have 3, 4, 5 sunny, dry days if they're going to cut hay. Because what they do is they go out and mow the hay down, and it lays over on the grass, on the stubble, lays it over. And then the sun beats down upon it and begins to dry it, begins to dry the hay. And it's got to have 2, 3, 4 nice days for it to dry out. And then the harvester will come by and pick up the hay and push it into cubes, tie ropes around it, spit it out, and then guys like me would come by hand with a hay hook in one hand, grab the hay bale with a hay hook and throw it up on the wagon. Hundreds of times. Got to make hay while the sun shines. If it rains while the hay is lying on the ground, it's a bad thing. Because if it doesn't have enough moisture out, or if it rains on it, then the hay will mold, and then it's worthless. It's not nearly as good a quality. You got to make hay while the sun shines. It's not only true in hay, it's true in evangelism. It's true in evangelism. Well, I have good news and bad news for you. The good news is that what you sow, you will also reap. The bad news is that what you sow, you will also reap. Which will you be a part of? The good news or the bad news? We sang this song just a couple of weeks ago. It just fits so well with this sermon, we have to do it again. So if you mark down our songs on your calendar at home, well, I know we did this a couple weeks ago, but we're going to do it again. Stand with me, please, as we sing.